In this mini-series, we're going to demonstrate how to add in different types of content blocks into our pages in Squarespace. As this is the first chapter in the series, I'm going to take a little bit longer here, and we're going to go back to not quite the very beginnings, but once we've already got a website set up in Squarespace, we can go via the menu system on the left and go into Website. Once we've clicked into Website, we can go to Pages, and then we can navigate through and find the page that we want to add our block to. Click on that, and now we're in the page and ready to press Edit in the top left-hand corner. From here, we can hover over the gaps between each section, and we can see that there's an option to add a section either above or below. As this is a heading section that I've already created, I'm going to click on Add Section below, and in this section now we can choose to add in a blank section or one of the pre-existing templates available on Squarespace. To keep this really simple, I'm going to go with a blank section. And now we've got an area where we can add blocks via this button on the top left-hand corner. So let's add our first block, and it's going to be text. However, we can use the search to search for the option. As this content block is in the top left-hand corner of the menu, we're going to go for this option. And from here, we've got a standard text block. I've got some placeholder Latin text that I'm going to use for this example on a keyboard shortcut, using a text expander tool, and now I've got a couple of paragraphs to play with. If I click, hold and drag on this block, I can move it from one section to another, but within this main content frame. I'm going to keep this section depressed at the moment so we can see the 24-column grid that spans across the website. This means that we can break our content down into multiples, adding up to 24, meaning that we could go with a content block left and right, each spanning 12 columns. And that's what we're going to do here. But it stays within this framework. The reason it stays within this framework is that this section here will go off the edge of smaller screens. This allows us to keep a really good tight margin on our layouts and some nice balance throughout. If I wanted to increase the spacing between these text blocks, I can go into the section editor, of which I'll be covering in more detail in other tutorials, and then increase either the width or the height gap between each of these text blocks. Now with that done, let's start editing some of the text on the page. We've got two options. We can either add the text all in one block, as in this example here, or we can add multiple blocks if we want more tight control over the spacing between sections. So I'm going to rename this a subheading, and I'm going to put it in as a heading 2. Now we can align our content accordingly. The second option is to add our subheading into the same content block. And this is what I do most of the time. It's just easier to organize and manage, especially when we go across to mobile view to edit in here as well. But what it does mean, and if I bring this over to the right, so we've got the two contrasting options, we can adjust the height section between the areas to customize the gap between our heading blocks and our paragraph content blocks. Other options within the text editor are everything you'd expect to see from Microsoft Word, Google Docs, or Pages, including bold and italic, and recently the option to change color of text. I'd recommend using this sparingly and always have the overarching brand for your site in the back of your mind as you do this. We can also change for multiple heading styles within our content area, and another easy to use feature that's often overlooked is the difference between setting paragraph breaks and line breaks. So by default, if I was to press enter here, we create a brand new paragraph. This allows me to change the heading or paragraph style of this section below. But notice what happens when I press backspace to bring it back into the other paragraph. This is all a heading 3 now. So to separate it, I have to press enter. But say I just want this word to start on the next sentence. If I was to press enter, we've got a bigger gap here, and that won't work. So if I hold shift and press enter, it will create a line break. And this can happen with anything in your designs if you want to create more compact text layouts. So that it's enter to create a paragraph break, shift and enter to create a line break. Other design features in here, everything from the option to be able to put underline effects, including this underline effect here, we can also change the color of that underline. We can select our text and make any word, sentence, or phrase into a link. So let's say we want to make these words a link to another page. Highlighting them, I can go to the chain icon and I can either type in the URL, or I could choose to link to a file, email, or phone. We can change the justification or the alignment of each paragraph individually. We can also use the quote option to make a section of content on the page jump out. And of course, we've got bullet points and numbered lists. There's a strike through option and the option to indent and outdent text as well. The final two features in this text block before we wrap up, we've got the option to paste as plain text. Say, for example, if I was to copy this, add a new block, and just paste it in, we can see the formatting is retained. And that's the same if we were to link from another third-party website. So if we were to strip out all of that formatting, we can try it again. By just expanding this toolbar. If you don't see them all, we press the three dots to expand. And now we can use the paste from clipboard option. This is paste as plain text, and if you follow these instructions, we paste the content into this area now. Okay, Squarespace just lost connection there for a second, so I'm just picking up again. And so this is where we started from. Let's say we wanted to add a text block to the right and paste that content in once more. I'm going to add a new text block. We'll leave it empty for now. Add that text block in, and instead of pasting by using a keyboard shortcut, Command V here on a Mac, I'm going to go to the clipboard icon with a T in it. I could use the paste as plain text, or alternatively, I can paste the content in, highlight it all, Command A, and then use the remove text formatting option. That keeps the heading styles, but it removes things like the underline and the text color. I can adjust the column widths once these are in place. I can move them around so that they could be offset, or I could at any point decide to switch it up and go for a 3-column split. By clicking and dragging each column, when it goes from blue to gold, we know then that we have consistent column spacing. I could then duplicate a text section at any time and create a simple 3-column split. There's so much customization using Fluid Engine in Squarespace with our text blocks. The limit really is your imagination. Before we wrap up, we're going to head over to Mobile View and just check that everything is running as it should. Here we can see that the gaps between each of these blocks is a little bit too small. And we can also see some of these text blocks are too deep. So we're just going to reduce the height and a little bit of housekeeping to tidy up these content blocks. Squarespace gives us a lot of flexibility over the look and feel of our content blocks, and it allows us to switch to Mobile View at any time and change those sizes without it affecting the desktop view. In this chapter, we're going to add image blocks into our content section. We've got a section open here. It's completely blank at the moment, but the reason we know that there's a section here is, one, we can see edit section and new layout in the top right hand corner, and also we can see add block here in the top left. And we're going to click on this button to add a new block to our page, and you may have guessed it, we're going to choose image. We can see this empty block, which has got a dotted line around it and a little plus in the middle. If we were to save and go into preview mode, that would disappear because there's no content being added to that section yet. But jumping back into edit, we can either choose to add placeholder images or even our final images in place first before we start manipulating the image blocks. We can also resize that image frame to get to the outline structure that we want. So with that image resized, I can choose to duplicate that section, meaning that I have another image at exactly the same dimensions. Let's add 2 photos into these image blocks. I'll double click on the first one and I have 3 main options, or a 4th if we include adding a photo from our phone or tablet. So let's upload a file. We'll bring up our computer with the option to upload files directly from there. Select from library will allow us to view previously uploaded photos or previously selected photos from our stock library. Or we can choose to go straight to browse stock images, and that's what I'm going to do. we're going to jump to the Free Images tab, which is from Unsplash. We can either then go to Premium Images, where you pay by the photo via Getty, or alternatively, we can view previously uploaded images via My Library. All of these options are available to you. The Choose a Stock Photo will just jump automatically to this section. So let's add 2 nice scenic photos into each of these containers. First image is added. We can see at the moment it's not spanning to the full width of the image block. We'll come back to that in a moment. And let's add a second image. Once again, I'm going to browse stock images. Let's find something here. We'll go with this one. Okay, we can see that these images are floating. They're not really doing much on the page. There seems to be no overlying structure. So this is where we can go into the photo settings. And let's work through these one at a time. We can go into more editing settings here by going on the pencil icon. We can edit the link to make this link go to another page or external website, or even document or email. We can align that photo to left, right, or center within the container. A simple effect could be to go for something like this, where both images are now aligned towards the center, but we still have so much unused white space left and right that we're going to go in one step further. We can align vertically, not needed in this one because the photo's already aligning top and bottom. We can pin the photo. This means that when we start scrolling through the page, the photo will stay in place. It's more of an advanced feature, so we're going to unpin that for now. Finally, as I mentioned before, we can duplicate the image or, of course, remove it. So let's go into the edit option where we can see more editing options for that photo. We've got focal point. If this photo goes into a letterbox mode, which we will in a moment, the focal point comes into play. We can attach a link to the image, and importantly for accessibility, we can add in a title for the image, alt text. This is text in the background that will tell search engines and accessibility readers what the image says. Ideally, to get this right, we would have something like photo of a beautiful landscape. Once we've got these settings in place, there's a built-in editor, which I will cover in a separate chapter. And if we go to design, we can now choose to fit the design to the frame. So the photo fits to the frame proportionately, or we can get it to fill the frame to get that full landscape look and feel. We can alternatively assign shapes, where we could bring the handles of this image block in and have multiple circular photos. And we'll do that in just a moment as a further demo. But we're going to go back to fill and fill it to the bounding box of this frame. We could also choose to round the corners, either all corners at the same time. This is a 50 pixel rounded corner, or we could round off each corner independently. So we could have rounded corners on the left, straight edge on the middle. And let's do this as an example to show a more advanced layout. So now I'm going to do exactly the same with this image on the right. Select it once, go into the edit options, open the design, and I'm going to fill that photo in the frame. Now we fill the photo in the frame, we can see the skyline's coming in a little bit high. So this is where I can change the focal point so we can see 50% cloud, 50% mountain range. And I think we'll do the same with the photo on the left in just a moment. And we can see here the corner that it applies to. Top left, top right, bottom left. In this case, we want top right and bottom right, 250 pixels, to mirror the photo on the left. Before we finish up this area, I just want to change this focal point so the mountain range is roughly the same, almost as if they're in two different scenes but flowing on one from the other. Now we can go into Edit Section, and here I'm going to remove all gaps. Now we can see that this is like a two-part image, or I could go in and just add a tiny gap, but maybe go for 2 pixels in the middle. We can see a clear divide between them, and then we can choose to change the height of these images, and notice how those rounded corners remain consistent. Okay, now we've got this effect in place, let's duplicate this section, add a brand new section. I'm going to change the background color, just so we can differentiate them. And this time we're going to do something quite different. We're going to have 2 circular photos. So let's go to the edit option, and instead of going to fill, we can go to shape, and it defaults to circle. There are a couple of additional options here. We can stretch it, so if the frame increases in size, the photo will stretch to an ellipsis shape to expand to that container. We've also got image effects. For example, we can apply a film grain effect on each of these photos to make them come alive. Always use effects like these sparingly, in a way that you have a reason to use them in the first place. Finally then, we can add some text blocks to go alongside our image blocks. And let's add a text block to the right of each of these. I'm going to add some placeholder text. Notice how it's stretched these containers. We can change that by adjusting the bounding box here. And now I'm going to want to put this frame to align to the center, so we have some nice white space either side of the photo. With this section on the right, with this text block here, I'm going to make the first section bold, and now I'm going to duplicate that section, bringing it across to the right. By selecting all sections, I can now make sure that that text block goes all the way to the right hand side, and then adjust this so it goes to the center. It's now a case of playing around with it until we get a format that we're happy with. I'm aiming for the left and right sides to be consistent. I'm going to count the number of rows 5 there to make sure that our images are the same size. Once we're happy with that, we can reduce the bottom section up to make it more compact, and we have two very different image layout options here, but both are equally powerful and look fully bespoke, being built from the ground up using Squarespace. Final steps, we're going to head over to mobile view, and now we can make sure that these are nice and compatible and align nicely on mobile version. Just a little bit of fine tuning. I can really decide how I want these to be laid out on mobile, and this is not touching the desktop view at all. We now have our layout in place. Alternatively, I could reduce the width of the text content area and bring it up alongside the thumbnail image, making sure I've got plenty of space in between each of those sections. So it really is up to you how you want to format these content sections on both desktop and mobile. There's a lot of power at your fingertips, and it's a case of just playing around with the platform until you start building structures and systems that work for you. And if you want to speed up this process, I'd recommend heading over to our tool that we've built for rapid prototyping Squarespace structures that have these type of layouts already built into them, and that's squareforge.net. Just going to finish up this final section. And there we have it. Using multiple photos in different structures, but bringing in all key design elements that professional web designers use, like balanced white space and allowing mirror, impact, and consistency through our designs. For this chapter, we're going to add buttons and link styles so we can differentiate the two and decide which one's going to be better for what we're going to do. And here I've got an example I created in the last chapter, which covers images, and if you haven't seen that, I'd recommend you go and check it out. But first of all, we can add links from one page to another in Squarespace, to PDF documents, to email addresses, or third-party websites on almost any element in the site. So we can add a link to this image here, for example, by selecting on it once, going to the chain icon, and from here we've got a pop-up list of all the pages in our site. So we can search for all of the contact options in here. So let's go to this page here. At this stage I can copy this and add it into another link as well. Save us time having to find it each time. And as we can also see here, we can either remove the link if we go back into it, edit it, or copy the link. But if we edit it one more time, if we link it to a third page, we've got the option to open that link in a new tab. So when we click on it, it will open that page in a new tab at the top of our browser. And that's really good when we're linking to PDF documents or third-party websites. We can also see that this is too big here at the moment, so I'm just going to adjust that, align it to the center. A little bit of housekeeping so that they're nice and uniform. And let's add an image to our text area here. We could just press enter once to create a paragraph break and then put more info. We can highlight this text by clicking and dragging on it. And now we can click on the chain icon. Again, we can link to the same page or a separate page. Once that link's created, it's got a very subtle underline effect. And of course, we can do the same with content within the middle of a sentence, as shown in this example here. So those are text links. If you wanted something that jumps out a little bit more as a clearer call to action, then I'd wholeheartedly recommend buttons. And here we can go to add a new block. Second down on the left, we can see button. We can now drag this button into place. We can edit that button to 3 overarching styles. If you wanted something to stand out but not too bulky, you can go for tertiary, secondary, which uses the underline. This is specific to this website, and I'll show you how to customize these in just a moment. So there we go, a button positioned at the bottom, and we got the same options if we click on that link option as we did if we were to add a link into the text or as an image. But now let's duplicate this button and bring one across to the right hand side here. So now we have our signposts with clear call to actions below. Okay, next up, let's have a look at some of the styling. So I can click on the edit option via that pencil icon to change the text that we have within that. And we can go back in and tweak it at any point. This doesn't change the link that it goes to. And then if we go to design, we've got one key feature here, whether our button fits or fills the frame. So for example, we can align that button to the left and get it to fit so it's much smaller. And we can do the same for this one here. When we choose it to fit, it will adjust the width of the button depending on the content, as shown in this example here, up into the edge of the bounding box. The moment we hit the edge of that bounding box, it will drop to a second line. Or alternatively, we can increase the width of that bounding box, which gives us more to work with. And as shown here. Those are customizable options, whilst if we go with the fill option, it will fill to that bounding box, not just horizontally, but vertically as well. What I would strongly recommend against is to mix and match these. We want a uniform style throughout our website, ideally. Now we have 2 uniform buttons, but say we find those buttons a little heavy and we want to streamline them a little more. We've got options. We can either choose from 3 overarching button styles. Let's go for tertiary for each, which makes them more subtle, but they still have clear standout capabilities on the page. Another option is we can go in and edit our button styles. So let's say that we wanted our tertiary button to have a chunkier outline. So let's go for 2 pixels. We can do this in the settings, and also we can choose the font for this button style. Let's go for uppercase. We can now see that that button style is uppercase, and we're going to take it back to a 1 pixel outline as well. Our button style is complete, and we're ready to move on to the next section. Or are we? One final check that you need to go through each time is checking this on mobile, because the likelihood is, as in this example here, the button isn't in an optimal position. I'm going to move this across to the right and just bring it down a tiny bit. Or in fact, that could work quite well there. And I'm going to do that the same here. If you feel that the content's a little tight, you can just create yourself some more space. Bring them down a couple, and let's just bring these 2 blocks. So all I need to do is click, hold and drag to select multiple blocks as a way of easily editing these layouts. So our design now works on mobile, it works on desktop, and we're ready to go. For this tutorial, we're going to look at galleries, in particular gallery blocks, which are content blocks built into Squarespace. And we can either have full width galleries, as shown in this example via squareforge.net, head over there and you can steal any one of these layouts. We've got the templates here going anything up from 2 images to 3, 4, 5, 6. We can also change the aspect ratio from landscape, portrait, or square. And here's an example here of a portrait grid gallery with content offset to the left. And we're going to create something like that today. Another alternative example where we have an offset grid gallery. And then when we click on any of the photos, it will open them up in a lightbox. Of course, these are just small thumbnail images uploaded to the platform, so they would be full screen images, and we're going to use some stock photos as our example. So let's jump over to our playground page and have a look at this example here. First of all, I'm going to duplicate this section that was created for a previous tutorial, and we're going to use some of this content. So I'm going to delete these 2 items by click, drag, and selecting all of these. And I'm going to select that single image and delete that. Then I'm going to select these content blocks here and move them over to the left, creating some space for a gallery offset to the right. I can now add a gallery block. We can see it's 4th in the list here. And we've got some placeholder images already in place. I'm a little tired of these now because I've been using Squarespace for so long, but they do the job. I'm also going to reduce the height of that content block so I can make the section more compact. Already we can start seeing it take shape. What I'm going to do now is change the color of this background, and I'm going to make it the darkest color just so we can differentiate it from the section above. Before we start playing around with the gallery, let's tweak the settings for that entire section. And I'm going to remove the fill screen option. That makes it compact and fit from the top and the bottom of that section. The one thing we've got here though is that it's always adding an extra row at the bottom. So to balance it out, I'm just going to do the same from the top. And now we have a more balanced view. I can select this content and bring it down manually. Now that we've got rid of the default spacing, top and bottom, we need to adjust that accordingly as well. And I might adjust this so we have 8 photos instead of 12. Now with the gallery selected, I can click on the pencil icon. And from here, go to Design and choose 6 items per row, and that will drop it down to 2 rows of 6. I can also upload my images into this section here, or add images from our stock library via the Search Images option. Let's drop a couple of images in place. Notice that we can't select multiple photos, so we have to select one at a time. Once we've selected a photo, we can click Add. And then whilst that one's been added, we can go and do the same for the second photo. I'm going to add in 4. Alternatively, we can choose photos from Unsplash, stock photo library. But as these are already in my selected library, I can add these in. Let's add our 4th as well. What I'm going to choose to do now is go with 1 row of 4. So we're going to drop it down to 4 per row. And then we can choose to adjust the padding around the images as we see fit. I'm going to leave it at 20 because it fits quite nicely above and below. And now I need to just remove the extra spacing at the bottom of the gallery block to make the layout more compact. What I can do here is we can count the number of grid blocks above the content area. So there's 3. And then drop it to 3 at the bottom. This is always fun because I always find with the touchpad on my MacBook, it's always a little bit fiddly with this setting. So what I can do instead is move our button further down, bring the bottom up to that, and then adjust that into position. We shouldn't have to do it. There's a little bug in the system, but that's just one way of stopping it from constantly moving up and down. There we go, an interesting grid block structure. And what we can do now is adjust it to the full width. So we've got the content block here in the middle. It doesn't go to the edge of the screen, but what we can do is offset content, break it outside the content block, and so it goes right the way to the edge of the screen. I wouldn't want to do it on this end with the text because we're going to end up with that looking very messy, going right the way towards the left-hand side of the screen. So I'm going to leave that to the natural size, and this gallery going right the way to the edge. And once we've created that gallery, we can switch the design up to a slideshow with one large image, potentially with thumbnails below. We can go for carousel option, or we can leave it at our grid or finally stacked option, which wouldn't work as well in this particular example because of how we've laid out the content. So we're going to go back to grid. And finally, we're going to test this on mobile view. You can now choose to adjust the text content accordingly. Or of course, I could bring the gallery to sit at the top of the page and move the text block below. Just got to select those items. Reshuffle things around. And there we have it. The great thing about how this works with Squarespace is that even though we've got the images first on mobile, we haven't moved or touched anything on desktop view. So we still keep that specific look and feel for desktop, which then automatically adjusts at a breakpoint for mobile. Hope you found this tutorial helpful. There's loads more coming your way. We'll be looking at these content blocks in Squarespace and how we can create bespoke looking layouts. In this guide, we're going to show you how to add video blocks into our content. So let's say we've got this section here that I built for a previous tutorial, and we want to swap out these images for video blocks. I can click on the image, click on the trash can, and I'll do the same with this one as well. One thing I want to do is just create a bit more space for my content. So I'm moving the content blocks further over. And I could either keep them in this format, or alternatively, I could decide to change up the format and have the video sitting above the content block. We'll try that afterwards as well, but I'm going to add two video blocks in place. So I'm going to go up to this add block section or button top left hand corner. That'll bring up the pull-up menu, and we're looking third down from the left. Once we add that video block in place, we can see that the margins are quite tight to the edge of our text block. So we can either make this one grid space smaller. We're working on the 24 column grid, or alternatively, we can go into the section settings. So edit section here. Just going to bring this into space, and we can manually adjust this gap between sections. So let's go up to say 30 pixels. It will make this text block narrower, but it gives you more control over the spacing between elements. Now we've added that video block in, I can duplicate it and position it here. And if I wanted an alternative view, and this is what I love about Squarespace, we can duplicate that section and try it in a different orientation. I'm going to go for a darker color palette here, mainly so we can differentiate the two, but we've got a lot of customization in terms of how this looks. The color change makes a big difference. Here I'm going to adjust these text blocks and make them much wider, as shown here, which means I can make the videos wider. I'm going to bring that button down, or I can select the button and the text block, bring it down into place. What I would do here is get one of these columns sorted first, and because it's the same, just about the same content in each, it's only placeholder content, I'm going to do just that in this tutorial. But I've deleted the right hand column. Why have I done that? Well, mainly because I'm going to switch to mobile view and get this working on mobile first before duplicating it. It'll just save a little bit of time and hassle to tweak the other column afterwards. Otherwise we'd have to do this process twice. And even then we'd have to double check to make sure that there's synergy between the two layouts. So I'll get that working first, and I'll just double check the other section above as well. So we can see that there's some differences here that need to be tidied up. Let's move that down one grid space, move that one grid space below that, and then we might add two grid spaces to the top of this video, as shown here. Let's move that up as well. There we go. First section, second section, which needs that to be replicated. But you can see that there's a lot of similarities between the two sections. We may even be able to adjust the video so it spans the full width of the mobile view. And we need to test this to make sure all of the controls are fully available, but this is quite a nice bespoke look and feel for mobile view to get the most out of that video position. And I think we'll go with that. Let's jump back to desktop view, quickly duplicate this second section, move this block over here, and just move it up a little bit as well. I don't like that spacing there at the moment, so I'm just going to make that more compact. And at the moment we've got that offset. So I can select all of these blocks and now bring them over to the full width. And I'm going to do the same for this section here as well. Remember, I can manually adjust the gutter space between our two columns. I think that's what I'm going to do here, is bring it up to 40 pixels. A little bit more breathing space between those two columns. Okay, I'm happy with that. But save it, then jump back to mobile, because there'll be a little bit of tweaking to do. Now we've made a couple of changes there. But we're only needing to edit the second of the two columns. Marvelous. Final step, and that's bringing our videos in place. I've got YouTube open here in a second tab. And let's have a look at putting in one hosting a tutorial and one Squarespace tutorial. If I click on the three dots and then click on share, I should be able to copy this shorthand URL here, jump back to Squarespace, then click on the add video option. So instead of uploading a file to the Squarespace CDN or content delivery network, this is the online storage area and management area for files, we're going to add from a link. We're going to paste that link in place. If the link works, we should have a green sentence here that it says the video is found and ready for use. We click add. If it doesn't show that properly, try going through to the video and then clicking on the URL at the top. That's another way of sharing the video, but usually that will work. That's our first video in place. Now let's double click and add our second video, but I need to jump back to YouTube and I'll use this one as an example here. So the same thing, three dots, share, copy the URL, jump back to Squarespace, and now paste that video. And click add, and now we can see those videos are now in place. I could do the same for these as well. And just to save me having to go back again, I'm just going to do the same with this one as well. With Squarespace, as with most software, repetition is key, so the best thing to do is just have a play around with it. If you're finding that there's an extra space here in the bounding box, I'd recommend just doing a bit of housekeeping and tidying that up. Bear in mind this shouldn't affect your mobile view, but it's always worth just hopping back over and double checking that that's looking good there. Main thing is the ratio are narrower for the thumbnail coming in from YouTube, so we may want to do a little bit of fine tuning. That's completely up to you though. Okay. We've now been able to add videos into our pages. So we can add multiple videos if you want to go down the route of creating grid galleries. Let's just do that very quickly here. This time I'm going to get rid of these text blocks and we're going to go to say 4 videos per row. No, 3 will be better. With that golden line down the middle, we know that that's perfectly positioned right in the middle of the content block. And once we've got that in place, we can duplicate it and drop it over to the right. We could either add in 3 text blocks below. Once we've got those in place, we can head over to mobile and double check that they're working properly. And then once that row's complete, we can duplicate that row and create a grid gallery setup below. If we go into the video settings, we have some additional options. We can add a custom feature image, and that allows us to upload, say for example, our YouTube thumbnails and put them in place. Or we can select an image from the library, and let's just find an example here. So let's go for this one. And we can see that if you like a more low-key look and feel to your videos with just a small play button in the middle, that's another alternative approach for you. It really depends on what you want to do. In my case, I often leave the YouTube thumbnails in place because it just showcases to people that I have a YouTube channel. Let's jump out of editing mode and then click on this arrow to go into full preview mode. If the viewer hovers over the icon in the top left-hand corner, there's an option to subscribe to the channel and also hit the notification bell as well. For me, that beats the maybe slightly neater approach of having a thumbnail that doesn't have that instant icon showing that there is a YouTube channel behind it. For this tutorial, we're going to look at inquiry forms in Squarespace, and we're going to build one from scratch, but also I'm going to flick through the options we've got here in SquareForge, information about this in the description, and we can see there's a few different contact form options available to us. These are just simple starting styles which we can add to our form blocks as well. Let's say we wanted this option here. We click edit. We find the selection that we like, and we'll save it as a favorite for later. If you don't have SquareForge or you don't intend on getting hold of it, don't panic, because I'm going to show you how to build both of these forms from the ground up. So now I've saved those, I can exit and I don't need to save the page. Those are now saved as favorites, and we can go down to our playground page and edit this. And we're going to add two sections which are both saved from those options. So that's the first one, that's the second. Both should work on mobile. So if we switch to mobile, we can see that there's an image block here and then a contact form below. And this option here has got a background card color and an image below that form as well, but also an image above it. We switch back to desktop view. We've got the option to put two different images either side of this form, so quite a unique look to it. Let's say we wanted to replicate this and build it from the ground up. I've already got a blank section in here, but what I'm going to do is go to add section, then add a blank section. Let's look at the components that make up this section. We've got a text block for the title, then we've got the form, then we've got an image, which I've used just a simple grey swatch. This is what I use in SquareForge, just to make it adjustable and malleable to your final design. Sometimes I find that if you see photos or colours that don't quite match your brand, it can be quite off-putting. Let's start by adding the form in, because that's the main focus of this section. And as we can see here, we've got the form option. I'm going to put that into place, then I can drag it and resize it and adjust accordingly. Okay, so that's the first form in place. And we can see there's more padding here. So this is just simply a case of moving it across to create more spacing. And we're going to move it down a couple. We can see the grids behind. This will now allow us to add a new text block, which is the form title. We can see that's a heading 3 or 4. Let's have a look. It's a heading 3. So we're going to change this to match. And also positioned at the top. So if I deselect it and select it once more, we get our block options, and we can align this to the center to get more uniform spacing between the text and the form. That's starting to take shape. Finally, we can add our image block. I'm going to bring it right the way over to the left hand side and keep dragging so we can see that blue bounding box going to the center point. And I'm going to bring it right the way to the bottom as well. However, we've got more spacing above and below this section when comparing it to this one. Not a major problem. We can go into edit section, and I like to add that's by design as well to give us more flexibility. And so I uncheck the fill screen option. If I select it again, we can choose the default height of the section, which adds padding above and below. By removing that fill screen option, we can make this look compact. Say we wanted to select a photo from our library as opposed to the grey placeholder, we can do that. Nearly there. We can see that there's some extra spacing above and below. You may like that, but that would be difficult to keep that consistent across each section. What it's doing is it's fitting it proportionately. Because of the ratio of the photo, it's adding padding above and below. So we can switch this to fill, and that will fill to that container. Alternatively, we can switch the shape and then resize it so we have a smaller circular shape. But we'll go back to the original option, and now we can see that we've nearly built it. I can check here, we've got two block spacings above and below. Because we removed the extra spacing to make it more compact, we might need to just adjust this. And again at the bottom, so it balances out. And now readjust our image to fit that container. We now have that looking nice and smart. What I can do here is go in by double clicking on the form And we've got a number of options. We can change the submission button setting. We can rename the form. I definitely recommend doing that. Most importantly, we can go in and edit the form field. There's a wide range of options available to us, and I probably will create a more advanced tutorial in the future showing how we can get the most out of some of these more advanced options. A relatively new feature is file upload. This is one that I've been calling for years, and now we can upload files to our Squarespace forms. We can also add lines, survey options to restructure the form to make it look more appealing, and we can go in to edit the options as well. Any form field can be made required, and so we can see that it's required in brackets. It used to be an asterisk, but I quite like that in terms of it makes it very, very clear and easy for the viewer to understand what's required and what isn't. You can reorder the form fields by clicking on this grid block here and dragging it into position. Alternatively, you can just delete it. Once we've edited our form fields, we can look at the post submit. This is once they've filled in the form, there's a thank you message, and I strongly recommend just changing that to make it more personalized and a little more detailed. You can also add in some HTML and use trackers like Pixel. Alternatively, instead of sending a message within the page, you can send your visitor to a standalone page once they have filled in the form. For example, if you wanted to create a form that is a lead magnet which has a white paper that you're providing for free as long as someone signs up to a mailing list, you can change this to the page where they can download that document, or even send them straight to the PDF itself. If we go to design, there's a host of relatively new features with Squarespace on this option. We've got the option to switch it to lightbox mode. We can highlight the first input. Just be careful with that. It can look a little bit busy and over the top. Although I do like the glowing of the block itself. It's subtle, but it does the job nicely for us. We can set a stroke around the form, and this can create nicely detailed options around our form to make our designs look more bespoke. And of course, we can set the padding around the form itself. Because we've already taken care of the spacing elements, we're just going to remove all of those and leave that as it is. We've also got formatting like alignment options. We can change our button style to match either our secondary or tertiary style that we can edit via these button styles here. I've created a separate tutorial showing how you can edit buttons as well. And finally, if we go to our storage option, we can send our email notification to an email address of our choice. We've also got additional storage options as well, like being able to send it to Zapier or connect it to Google Drive, or once our visitors' contact details are in Google Drive, we can link them up to a CRM using Zapier, Make, TaskMagic, or any AI tool that you want. So many options with the form. If we jump back now, and we're going to quickly recreate this option here. So instead of cheating and going for that, we're going to go to the blank section. And we can see here, we've got the contact information. So I'm just going to copy and paste that to save us a bit of time. Drag our text block into position. I'm going to put it to center. And I'm going to move it just so it's taking up more space. Just double checking that is the right width. And we can see that this is a shape option here. But we're going to add our form in. Now we're going to add an image. This time I'm going to add one background image across the whole section. So I'm going to change it from this one a little bit. So to do this, I'm going to go to Edit section, and I'm going to add a background image. And again, we're going to select the same one from the library. And we can see that our image is in place, but it's looking a little bit washed out, and we're not seeing the content as we should. So if I'm going to go into Edit section, there's one more thing I'm going to do, which is go to that fill screen option as well. I'm just going to bring this text block down a little bit, and the same with the section below. Now I can add a new section, and here I'm going to add a shape. This shape is going to be stretched over that middle section to match the width of the section above. The reason these lines aren't aligned is due to the gap spacing in the section. So if I was to edit the spacing between each of these grid blocks, or just remove it completely, We can see now that those are aligned. And the final step is to move this back a couple of times so it goes behind the content. There we go. Two different styles. This one has two images, one left, right, a very different style here, and then one option with a full background image. So many effects that we can add to our styling, but things to make sure are ensuring that our content is easy to see and easy to read. That's how we keep visitors on our website. And the final tip is always go in and change these on mobile. So in this case, I would need to just extend that down, fix it behind, etc. But I've got loads of tutorials showing how to fix these designs on mobile view. We're now going to upload an audio file to Squarespace. I can say from personal experience in over a decade that this is one of the most underused features within Squarespace. As a platform, Squarespace offers audio storage and the ability to upload MP3 files directly into the admin area. And today I'm going to show you just how to do that. I'm going to go in and start editing a page, and we can see I've got a section here that I want to put an audio file below this content block. One thing to note that with Squarespace 7.1, we can add multiple sections to any page. With 7.0, the older version of Squarespace, we'd have to use an index page to create multiple sections, but now we can just do this straight off the bat. And one thing to remember is that when we add a block, we cannot move it from one section to another. So double check that you're in the right section first, and when you are, scroll down here to the audio option and select that. Alternatively, you can search for the option that you want. As we're going to add an audio block, I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to move it into position. Because this is built on Fluid Engine in Squarespace 7.1, we can expand and collapse our audio file block section. There's a lot of flexibility, fluidity with how we can do that. And I think I'm actually going to go with the slightly chunkier version that we started off with. And I'm going to leave one entire grid space gap between, so we've got some nice macro white space around our audio file. We can see the play button. That will switch to pause when you start playing the file. And when we're ready to upload, we'll just double click on this block. We've got two main options. We can upload a file, or we can link to an external file that's already online. And if I click this option, it will just take me to my computer. Alternatively, I can drag and drop from a folder into position. There's also an option to view a tutorial article about it, but that would defeat the object of this video. So I'm going to put a title in. Let's make that a bit better. There we go. So a more realistic title there. If this was a podcast episode, we would then add our audio track and it would load in the background. Once that's loading, we can switch over. If we want to add additional information, if this was a real podcast episode, we can put things like the series and episode number, and also the duration of the file as well. This can link up with all of your main podcast platforms. There's also the option to show a download link if someone wanted to have an offline copy of that file. And we can switch between dark and light mode. Because this is on a dark background, that's the option that we want. Bear in mind, it's the opposite of the text color. So dark mode means white text, light mode means black text and black block. We can see that would work on a light background. So if I was to change this section color, we can see how that looks there. So I'm going to switch this back, and we're going to do one final thing before we wrap up, and that is to check this on mobile view. At this point, I'm going to save my progress. Then I'm going to switch to the mobile view option, and as we can see, it's actually positioned it quite well there. I could just move this form block down one more block, just to give a little bit more breathing space on mobile. When we switch back to desktop view, we can see it's unchanged. That's what I do like about the Squarespace Fluid engine. We can really fine-tune how our mobile layouts look, but bear in mind, it does take a little bit longer to adapt our designs to mobile than it used to. This time out, we're going to add a newsletter sign-up block to this section, which is a blank section I've already added into Squarespace. If you haven't already added a new section for it yet, or you don't want to put it into an existing section, like this one here, then you can just click on this add section option here, and you've got a load of templates that you can choose. But in this case, we're going to go with the blank section, and I'm going to go to the top left-hand corner and click on add block. Once I've done that, we can scroll through these options and we can see the newsletter sign up option here on the right-hand side. If I click on that once, it now puts a new newsletter sign up feature in place. And the one thing we can notice is we can drag, move, and resize this block so we can put it amongst other content. Let's say we wanted to put it into an existing section with content in here already. So this one could be a different one as well. So I'm going to remove this previous audio clip that I added as a previous tutorial, and we're going to add one into this section. And notice the difference between the two options. By adding it in here, it's automatically switched to dark mode, meaning that the colors have changed automatically. So let's look about the styling options we can add for our newsletter sign-up form. First of all, I'd strongly recommend changing the form name to something specific to this page or this content type. Ideally, the mailing list that you're looking for users to subscribe to. Then the title will directly adjust the title on the page. And as you may have guessed it, the description will update this section here. Nice and straightforward so far. There's also the disclaimer option, and even if you're not based in the EU to conform to GDPR compliance, I'd strongly recommend that you add something in this section as well. But if you are looking for a more compact layout, I think it's pretty clear that this is very much an opt-in field. We've also got the option here to add a name field as well. Because of the width of this block, it's reorientated it. So again, you may not like that new format. There's a few things that we can do, namely increase the width of this by clicking on this bounding box and dragging it to the right. Another useful feature, post submit. The default is just a thank you, and this is for all inquiry forms within Squarespace, so I'd recommend going with something a little bit more detailed. There's also the option to put some additional custom code, enabling you to bring in third-party images or page structures into the pop-up message that replaces this form. And I'll show you an example in a moment in terms of what will appear. Alternatively, we can redirect the thank you page to a URL, which could be a file. If you were giving away a free lead magnet for every sign up, you can choose a file here, or a page within the site, or you can enter in a third-party URL to link them to a separate website. Again, make sure that the user flow is nice and easy and not at all confusing when doing that. If we switch on to the design settings, we've got the option to stack or float. There's no difference here. That's again because of the width of this bounding box. When we have a wider frame, we can see that the float option will float them all landscape if you allow the space for it. Alternatively, the stack option will stack them in a vertical format. We can align it to the left. In this format here, a left alignment option works probably the best. I'll change that bounding box so it sits below the introduction and this form on the right. Just judging this, having two forms on the same page is probably overkill, and it would be too confusing. We need one clear call to action, but we're just demoing it at this stage. Also, we've got the option to add a stroke. So again, check out the tutorial I've created for contact forms, and I went into more detail in showing how to style that. But the outline option and the option to put a background color are two relatively new but welcome features to Squarespace. We can also put rounded corners around our subscription form as well. Also, padding options, blend mode. If you're overlaying this over top of an image, you've got a number of different overlay filters that you can get. And if you come across from Photoshop, you would know all about what I'm talking about there. And another really nice effect, and I've been able to play around with this to create some really nice finishes, is the option to add a blur. If you're adding an inquiry form over top of quite a detailed photo, it will blur the background behind this container, which can work really nicely. Again, relatively new feature that's nice to work with. So let's just go to this option here. And we're going to put the required name field in just to demo how that looks when we have all of those fields in place. Final option here is storage. So Squarespace has Squarespace email campaigns, its built-in marketing tool, and you can automatically add subscription signups to one of those databases. So for example, add to mailing list. You need to go in and set up your email campaigns mailing list first, and then this form will automatically drop the contact into there. We've got the option to send confirmation email if you want to apply additional verification, making sure you're not picking up any spam. And another anti-spam measure is the Google reCAPTCHA. There is very few instances where I'd recommend removing that feature. And if we look at other storage options, we can link it up to Zapier, or we could link it to Google Drive, namely Google Sheets. So every time someone subscribes, it adds it in as a new item in a Google Sheet row, meaning that if we don't use Zapier, if we use something like, for example, Task Magic, which I use, as soon as that row's been added in Google Spreadsheets, we can go and drop that contact into our CRM or other platform. So a lot of power here, a lot of features available with the subscription option. If you don't have a huge amount of traffic to your site, you might find that you don't have a huge uptake for this feature, but it can certainly build with your website over time. Finally, I just want to show you what the Post Submit button looks like. If we exit the edit mode and go into the preview mode by clicking on this arrow in the top right hand corner, submit it there, and we can see now that we've got our thank you message. So that's something I would recommend looking at that Post Submit option just to put something a bit more personalized in. But we can see it only affects this section, the container where your email sign up is. Hope you found this helpful. We do have a free community over at SKOOL with a K, and I've left some information in the description where we cover everything website builders and go into a lot more detail in providing you tutorials and give you the option to ask us questions for all of the headaches and problems that you're having getting used to website builders. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. If you want to say in the future direction of the content that I'll be creating at Pixelhaze Academy and to get involved in our community, all you need to do is leave me your email address. We're looking to create our first community in the coming weeks, and I'm going to be throwing everything I've got at it. That includes our Moonshot Transformation Program, our entire library of online courses, the opportunity to engage with me in regular group sessions. There's more information in the description, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can develop this. Thanks again, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.